slightly distanced herself from the group to investigate. As she moved away, the forest seemed to hold its breath. Suddenly, in the flickering light, a figure materialized before Edidiong. There, standing in a radiant white attire, INIOBONG found herself in a surreal underwater realm, surrounded by otherworldly beings that seemed to shimmer with an ethereal glow. The water spirits in various forms and colors moved gracefully around her, as if choreographed by the rhythm of the river. The currents created a mesmerizing dance, and Ini's senses were overwhelmed by the beauty and strangeness of this aquatic world. In the midst of the aquatic ballet, a regal figure emerged from the depths, a woman of unparalleled grace and beauty, with cascading water tendrils that seemed to be part of the river itself, approached INIOBONG. The queen of the water spirits, adorned in shimmering aquatic attire, exuded an aura of both power and benevolence. INIOBONG, still disoriented and terrified, felt a mixture of awe and fear as the queen swam towards her. The queen's eyes, like deep pools of ancient wisdom, locked into INIOBONG's gaze. With a touch as gentle as a ripple on the water's surface, the queen touched INIOBONG's forehead. "You did not wrong the waters." The queen spoke in a melodic voice that resonated with the river's song. "You have no business being here. Go back to your people." The words echoed in INIOBONG's mind, and just as quickly as she had found herself in this mystic realm, she felt a sensation of weightlessness. The water spirits encircled her, creating a whirlpool of shimmering lights. Ini closed her eyes, and the next moment, she felt as though she was being lifted from the depths of the river. Suddenly, INIOBONG opened her eyes, finding herself on the riverbank, coughing violently. Water expelled from her lungs, and her vision gradually cleared. She was disoriented, lying on the riverbank with a mysterious man by her side. The young man, Ekong, a palm wine tapper with withered features and kind eyes, was tapping wine when he noticed INIOBONG in distress. He thanked God for his timely arrival as INIOBONG struggled to regain her strength. The mysterious encounter with the water spirits lingered in her mind like a vivid dream. INIOBONG, weak and unable to walk, felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude towards Ekong as his strong arms cradled her and gently placed her on the wooden boat. As Ekong paddled away from the riverbank, INIOBONG's gaze lingered on the water, still uncertain whether the encounter with the spirits had been a dream or a reality. Ekong, a kind-hearted and observant young man, noticed INIOBONG's contemplative expression, paddled on gently while reassuring her that she's in safe hands now. As they navigated the calm waters, Ekong shared tales of the mystical creatures that inhabited the water. Legends spoke of the benevolent water spirits and a queen who held dominion over the aquatic realm. INIOBONG listened intently, realizing that her experience might have transcended the ordinary boundaries of the mortal world. As the villagers arrived at the stream, the air was thick with tension and sorrow. Nsikak and Edikang, frantic with worry, joined the crowd to search for their beloved daughter Ini. Edidiong, still feigning distress, pointed towards the water and sobbed uncontrollably. In the midst of the chaos, Nsikak's mind raced back to her haunting dream. The premonition she had experienced now seemed like a chilling prophecy. The vivid imagery of Edidiong's indifference replayed in her mind, leaving her paralyzed with fear. Edikang too couldn't shake off the eerie connection between the dream and the unfolding tragedy. 3 brave men dived into the water, their bodies disappearing beneath the surface as they ventured into the dark depths of the water in search of Ini. The underwater world proved formidable, the coldness seeping through their bodies and the strong current making it difficult to navigate. Despite their best efforts, the men were forced to resurface, gasping for breath. The other villagers watched in silence, their collective hope dwindling with each unsuccessful attempt. Nsika cried. Her cries echoed through the air, a heart-wrenching lament that mirrored the pain of a mother fearing the loss of her child. Edidiong, on the other hand, continued her facade of innocence, joining in the collective sorrow with tears that masked the guilt she harbored within. The villagers, understanding the gravity of the situation, offered words of comfort to the grieving family. They assured Nsikak and Edikang that if INIOBONG had indeed drowned, her body would likely surface the next day. It was a grim consolation. The next day, Edikang, accompanied by a group of villagers, returned to the stream, their hearts heavy with the expectation of a grim discovery. They combed the banks, paddled boats through the river, and searched tirelessly, hoping to find any trace of INIOBONG's body. The sun hung high in the sky, casting a solemn light over their desperate efforts. Despite their exhaustive search, the river yielded no signs of INIOBONG. The villagers, exhausted and disheartened, returned to the village with heavy hearts. Amidst the despair, a peculiar sensation gripped Nsikak, an unshakable feeling that INIOBONG was still alive. This intuition provided a glimmer of hope, a flicker of light in the darkness that enveloped her soul. Nsikak, torn between grief and an inexplicable sense of connection, grappled with the conflicting emotions that consumed her. In contrast, Edidiong reveled in her secret accomplishment, concealing her sinister satisfaction behind a facade of mourning. The villagers, unaware of the truth, offered condolences to the grieving family. INIOBONG found herself in the care of the villagers in a distant land, slowly recovering from the trauma inflicted by her sister. Ekong, the compassionate palm wine tapper who had rescued her, took it upon himself to be her solace and confidant. As INIOBONG regained her strength, she recounted the harrowing tale of betrayal and near drowning at the hands of Edidiong. Ekong, filled with pity and empathy for INIOBONG, offered to take her back to Akama. However, INIOBONG declined the offer. She didn't want to return just yet. Instead, she hatched a plan to unveil Edidiong's deceit and make her face the consequences of her actions. The moon hung low in the night sky, casting an ethereal glow over the dense foliage as Edidiong and the other maidens ventured into the bush for their annual snail hunting tradition. With small bowls and flickering light source, they crouched down to pick snails, their laughter mingling with the nocturnal symphony of the wilderness. As Edidiong immersed herself in the task, the air was filled with a mysterious hush. Unbeknownst to her fellow maidens, Edidiong heard a faint voice calling her name. Startled, she stood up and scanned the darkness, her heart pounding in her chest. "Did anyone call me?" she inquired, her eyes darting among her companions. The response was a collective denial. Undeterred, Edidiong returned to the snail hunting, but the eerie feeling lingered. Then, a second time, the voice called her name. Edidiong! Like a gentle whisper carried by the night breeze. Edidiong, curious and unnerved, slightly distanced herself from the group to investigate. As she moved away, the forest seemed to hold its breath. Suddenly, in the flickering light, a figure materialized before Edidiong. There, standing in a radiant white attire, was INIOBONG. her presence casting an otherworldly glow. Young's eyes widened with disbelief, a mix of fear and astonishment seizing her. Overwhelmed by the spectral vision, Young let out a piercing scream, the sound echoing through the night. The other maidens, alerted by distress, rushed to her side. They found Young on the forest floor, trembling and unconscious. Panic gripped the group as they quickly gathered around her. Their snail-hunting expedition abruptly transformed into a night of inexplicable fear. Carrying the unconscious Young, the maidens hurriedly made their way back to the village. When Young regained consciousness, she concocted wild tales to explain her erratic behavior to her parents, deflecting any suspicion that might arise. As the days passed, the weight of guilt and haunting dreams pressed heavily on Young's conscience. The unsettling dreams persisted, tormenting her nights and leaving her in a perpetual state of anxiety. One evening, unable to bear the torment any longer, Young slipped away from her home and ventured into the bush to seek the counsel of Akani, the renowned native doctor. Akani, attuned to the energies that surrounded him, sensed Young's presence before she uttered a word.
Confess to your parents, for that is the only way you will have peace.
Akani intoned as Young entered his hut, his gaze penetrating her troubled soul. Shocked and frightened by his revelation, Young wondered how Akani could know her darkest secret without being told. Feeling cornered, she reluctantly knelt before him, pleading for help. Akani, wise in the ways of the unseen, informed Young that the only path to redemption was to confess her misdeeds to her parents. He warned her that a worse fate awaited her if she continued down the path of deceit. Hopeless and desperate, Young left Akani's hut, the weight of her guilt heavier than ever. As night covered, Young sneaked back into the compound through the back gate, hoping to avoid any prying eyes. Just as she was about to open the gate, a ghostly figure appeared before her. INIOBONG standing in front of her with an otherworldly presence. Overwhelmed with fear, Young let out a blood-curdling scream and fled into the darkness. Her terrified cries echoed through the village as she ran, repeatedly shouting, "I saw her! I saw her!" Villagers, awakened by the commotion, apprehended Young and brought her back to her home. Nsikak, already troubled by the loss of one daughter, now witnessed the deteriorating mental state of the other. Days passed, and Young descended into a silent abyss of paranoia and fear. Startled by the slightest sounds, haunted by haunting dreams, she withdrew from the world. The once vibrant Young was gradually succumbing to the overwhelming weight of guilt, her mind unraveling in the shadows of her own secrets. Nsikak, desperate to understand her daughter's suffering, pleaded for her to open up, but Young remained tight-lipped, haunted by the specter of her own misdeeds. Despite her emaciated state, Nsikak managed to convince Young to accompany her to the market. Reluctantly, Young agreed. The market square buzzed with activity on Ekuru Ekpe Market Day, but Young, burdened by the weight of her guilt, was a mere shell of her former self. Days of seclusion had taken a toll on her, her once vibrant spirit replaced by a haunting fear that in its ghost would exact revenge. As they navigated the bustling market, a sudden tap from behind sent shivers down Young's spine. She turned, and there, standing before her, was Ini, a living, breathing apparition that shattered Young's fragile facade. The scream that tore from Young's lips echoed through the market, drawing the attention of villagers and traders alike. Chaos ensued as the crowd rushed towards the distressed maiden. The men restrained her, believing she had succumbed to madness. Young pointed toward a direction, screaming, insisted that Ini was dead. The villagers, perplexed and alarmed, turned their attention towards the direction Edidiong pointed at. The shock of seeing Ini alive rippled through the crowd. In that moment, Ini seized the opportunity to demand the truth, her voice cutting through the commotion. "Confess, you evil human," she proclaimed, her accusation directed at Edidiong. The villagers, now realizing the gravity of the situation, shifted their gaze back to Edidiong, who sat on the ground, engulfed in shame. In a moment of raw confession, Edidiong revealed the sinister plot she hatched against her sister. Nsikak, heartbroken and betrayed, rushed to Ini, embracing her with a mix of relief and anguish. The crowd, stirred by the revelation, turned their anger towards Edidiong. A wave of rage swept through the villagers, and in an uncontrollable fit of fury, they began to throw stones at her. Nsikak, desperate to shield her daughter from the onslaught, pleaded for mercy, but the crowd, fueled by a collective sense of justice, overwhelmed her. The stones rained down on Edidiong, sealing her fate in a tragic finale to deceit and treachery. Moral lesson. The story teaches us about the consequences of deceit, betrayal, and the destructive power of jealousy. Edidiong's actions, driven by envy and bitterness, led to a tragic chain of events that brought about her own downfall. The narrative underscores the importance of honesty, forgiveness, and the recognition that harboring negative emotions can have dire consequences, not only for oneself, but for those around us. If you enjoy my story, please make sure to subscribe, not forgetting to hit on the bell notification icon so that when next I post another interesting story, you will be the first to know about it. Thank you.